It has been a hot minute since I've been back at my home poker room at TCH Social in Las Colinas here in Texas. And I actually took almost a month off of playing. And to be honest, I wasn't really burnt out with the poker aspect. It was more of the constant travel, hotels, flights, Ubers, and being gone more than I was home was finally catching up to me. So taking a break was much needed, and I was able to work on my health, fitness, cooking, got a lot of things done around the house, and was able to just take a break, spending time with family and friends, and honestly was much needed. And sometimes you don't realize you need a break until you take one. So feeling super refreshed here, ready to get back on the felt. So let's go play some 1-2 300 max buy-in at Las Colinas. Also, I guess I should add, it's really important to recognize when you need breaks, especially when it comes to playing poker. Tournaments, cash games are all very mentally taxing, emotionally stressful, and you do need to check in and make sure you have breaks. And I think the biggest thing for me is maintaining balance in my life, having things I enjoy off the felt, like playing basketball, going and working out, hanging out with friends, and for me, I do a lot of cooking. So make sure you guys take breaks when you need it. I promise you it'll do wonders for your results. It is so nice to be back on the felt after a much needed break, and I'm here in Las Colinas at TCH Social to play this 1-2 300 max buy-in no limit hold'em game with a double board no limit bomb pot every dealer change. So let's have some fun and get into some hands. And one of the very first hands I get involved with, there's a few players taking a break, so in this case we are six-handed and I have a starting stack of 300 when there's an under the gun raise from a player that has me covered to $10. Next to act, under the gun 1 puts in the call. I'm in the hijack and look down at queen jack offsuit. This isn't the best hand to put in a flat as we're going to be dominated by the under the gun openings range quite often. So for example, he's opening ace queen, king queen under the gun. So when we flop a queen, we're going to be dominated a lot of the time and we're not suited, so we don't have a lot of playability post flop. So I think this is a great spot to put in a 3-bet, as in these 1-2 games, players under defend to 3-bets, they overfold, and we can take this down in many ways post-flop or even pre-flop if they decide to fold. Also, I should note that I have played a little bit with the under the gun raiser, and he is a more competent player who likes to be aggressive and raise a lot of hands pre-flop, so I know he's just not raising nutted hands under the gun, therefore we can put in 3-bets and get a lot of his weak hands to fold. So I raised to $40, it folds all the way around to the original raiser, he pretty quickly lets his hand go, and the player next to him also folds, so we get to pick up $23, good for a little over 10 big blinds in this first hand here at the 1-2. In this hand, we are still six-handed as there's a $5 straddle under the gun. Under the gun 1 makes the call, and then the active player, who we just 3-bet last hand, puts in the raise to $17. The player on the button folds, and now it's on me in the small blind, and I look down at pocket jacks. Again, facing a very active player who likes to raise a lot, he's going to be opening very wide. So my hand wants to raise, of course, because it's a premium, we want to go for value, and we want to deny equity against hands like king-queen, for example. So I'm going to put in a 3-bet, and it's going to be a little bit larger, being out of position, so I raised to $80. It folds all the way around to the active player, he thinks for a little bit, but then decides to let his hand go, and we pick up another nice pot, and luckily for us, we don't have to see a flop with these jacks. In this hand, the $5 straddle is on, and there's one player that calls in early position, and then I look down at queen 9 of hearts. This is a hand that I think I could flat and try to see a flop multi-way or put in the raise, and this time I decided to raise, and I made a mistake. I accidentally made it $16. I think I should have gone like 20, 25, possibly even 30 to thin the field and get heads up or just take it down. The cutoff, small, big, straddle, and the limper calls, so we are going one big happy family to a flop of ace, jack, king with no hearts, so we absolutely pretty much whiff this board. The small blind then leads for $25 into all opponents, so he should have a very strong hand in this spot, leading out of position into all these players. He picks up a couple callers, and of course we have nothing to do here except put in the fold. I end up getting to see the hand play out and show down, and the small blind was leading with ace 10 offsuit, so he had a pair of aces with a 10 and ended up hitting a queen on the river, so he made a straight. But it was very important to note that this player led out of position with a hand like ace 10 offsuit, and in this spot that's very dangerous to do considering there's lots of opponents that could have the nuts, and being the original raiser, I'm completely uncapped. I could have aces, jacks, kings, ace queen, ace king, so many hands that dominate my opponent, so I wouldn't recommend leading with this type of hand. He had a hand that he would like to check call with because multi-way his hand is not that strong facing that many opponents and it's not nutted. But anyway, we're gonna move on to the next one. Alright everyone, you know what time it is. It's been a minute, but it is time to buckle up, put on your seatbelts. This is the hand of the night. In this hand, under the gun limps, and the player to my right limps. I look down at 10-8 of diamonds, and again, I think we can go either way in this spot, and because I had been raising being aggressive, I decided to just call this time. And then a player on my left puts in the raise to $15. He picks up 6 callers, so we go 7 ways, $15 each to a flop of King 9-6 with 2 diamonds, and the diamonds are the 9 and the 6, so we actually flop a 10 high flush draw and a gutter straight flush draw. It checks all the way around to the button, which is the player with the ace 10 offsuit from last hand, and he bets $35. A player to my right in early position makes the call, and in this spot, I think we're just going to put in the call. We have a 10 high flush draw. We could put in a raise, but I chose to call. The turn is the ace of diamonds, so now we have made our 10 high flush, which obviously is still vulnerable to higher flushes, however, somewhat unlikely. The early position player checks, and now it's on me. I have a choice between betting or checking, and just knowing my opponent, I think he's going to continue to put money in this pot. He seemed to overvalue medium strength hands, so even with the flush coming in, I don't think he's going to slow down, just given the player type. So I do decide to check it over, being a little bit trappy, and he does put in a bet of $60. Then the player to my right thinks for a little bit and then puts in the call, and so now I'm in a great spot with the SPR getting a little bit shallower, starting the hand with about $300, a great spot to just jam all in for a little over $200. My opponent on the button doesn't think very long before saying, I call. The other player folds, so now we are both all in on the turn, 10 high flush, and here's what happened.
Got the nuts over there. Nice hand.
The river rolls off another 9, and I absolutely hate it as my opponent flips over. Pocket sixes, he had a set, river to full house against my 10 high flush, and we get stacked. So now we have to put in the full rebuy. We're back in for $300, but we are in for a total of $600. Let's see if we can get some chips back. In this hand, the same guy who was raising a lot under the gun early in this session, the more active player, puts in the raise to $10 under the gun too. The player directly to his left, the early position player, puts in the call for $10, and I look down at King Jack offsuit. For all the same reasons I mentioned in the very first hand we 3-bet with the Queen Jack off, I think this is another good spot to put in the 3-bet, so I 3-bet yet again to $40. It folds all the way back to the original raiser, and I know he's probably going to get a little bit sick of me 3-betting, so he's going to reach deeper down into his range, trying to figure out what hands to call me with, which generally makes players make mistakes by flatting with hands that they should either put in 4-bets with, or hands that they should just never be raising pre-flop, or just putting in a call to a 3-bet. So he does indeed decide to defend. The player to his left quickly folds, so now we're going to go heads up to a flop. The flop is King 10-8 with 2 diamonds, so we do flop a very nice hand with top pair Jack kicker. My opponent checks it over to me, and now on this board texture, I wasn't quite sure what bet size to choose, but I did look up the spot later, and as you can see, when we're in a 3-bet pot with King 10-8 2 diamonds, we want to go somewhere between 20 and 33%, which is what I did. I put in the down bet to $15. My opponent then puts in the check raise to $50. So now, facing aggression from our opponent with a check raise, we have to ask ourselves 2 questions. 1, does our hand want to repolarize? And 2, is our hand strong enough to continue? Our hand is not a super nutted hand. We do have top pair with a nice kicker, but our hand is not strong enough that we want to pile in money with this one. It's just 1 pair. And 2, is our hand strong enough to continue? Absolutely. Our opponent could still be doing this with some bluffs, some worse King X hands, possibly even some straight draws. So for all those reasons, we are going to do nothing except put in the call. So we head to a turn card, which is the Ace of Spades, and now my opponent checks. So in theory, this card is obviously going to be better for us than our opponent. However, if he was semi-bluffing with a hand like Ace-8 of diamonds for a huge combo draw, he just made a pair, and he's probably likely to continue betting. Or if he's making a move, for example, with a hand like Ace Deuce of diamonds and he hits his pair of aces, he doesn't actually love it too much, as I can still have some Ace X, like I'm gonna have Ace Queen here, Ace Jack, etc. So he can check now and try to get to showdown with his weaker Ace X combinations. Or my opponent was just trying to see where he was at, quote unquote, even though that's not really a thing, with a hand like King Queen, something like that. But here's the thing, a lot of players will continue putting in bets on this turn card, but with our exact hand, we actually have great showdown value. Our opponent has check raised us on the
the flop, and we do have middle pair now, so our hand did downgrade a little bit. If we keep betting here, what worst are we going to get called by? Probably just some straight draws and flush draws. Other than that, our hand just wants to get to showdown. So when my opponent checks, I don't need to turn my hand into a bluff. We have a great hand to showdown, so I checked. The river is another ace, and now my opponent starts carving out a bet of $55. Before my opponent could even reach back to his chip stack, I flicked in the call, and my opponent flips over King Jack suited, so we're gonna chop this one up and move on to the next one. In this hand, the $5 straddles on under the gun, there's one caller in early position, and I look down at the beautiful Queen Jack of diamonds. I raise it up to $20. I pick up 3 callers, and then the original limper of the $5 directly to my right goes all in for $36 total. We all put in the call, so we are going to go 4 ways to a flop in this pretty bloated pot. The flop is King, Queen, Deuce with 1 diamond, and it checks over to me. We have middle pair and a backdoor flush draw. I think I can thin the field here and get value from some worse hands, and if we get called, we can just try to get to showdown, so I bet $20. Only the player who stacked me earlier with the set of 6s makes the call, so we're gonna head to a turn card, which is a 10 of clubs. He checks it over to me, and now, again, because our hand is just second pair, we don't want to keep piling in money. We're happy to get to showdown. I put in the check. The river is the 7 of clubs, so now it brings in the backdoor club flush. My opponent checks again, and we can consider going for thin value here. However, I don't want to value own myself in this bloated pot with second pair, so I put in the check, and then my opponent flips over ace 10 for a pair of 10s. He had flopped a gutter, and then the all-in player for $36 flips over Queen Jack offsuit, so we are going to chop up another pot. However, this time I won a little nice side pot, so now my stack is up to $360, and now we're finally headed in the right direction. In this hand, under the gun player limps for $2, and I look down at ace 4 of clubs in the hijack, and I raise it up to $15. Only the original limper makes the call, so we're gonna go heads up to a flop of 8-3-3 with 1 club. He checks it over to me, and normally I'd be down betting a little bit smaller on this board with my whole range. However, this is a pretty dry texture. We don't have the greatest hand that can improve, unless we of course turn a club or an ace, so I decide to go a little bit bigger and try to get a lot of his hands to fold, so I bet $15. He makes the call, and so we head to a turn, which is the 6 of diamonds. Now he checks it over to me yet again. This card isn't the best one in the world, and if he was limping with a hand like pocket deuces, pocket 4s, pocket 5s, I don't think he's going to fold to this card either unless I start bombing really big. Another thing is he could be calling flop with a hand like king high, queen high, maybe even a hand like jack 10, so we are still beating some of the hands that he arrives here on the turn with, so I decide to check and hope to get to a showdown. The river is a 7, and he leads for $45. He probably knows this is a decent board for him to bluff, especially when I check turn, but I can also have some hands that have showdown value when I check the turn, so I am beating hands like jack 10, king jack, king queen, queen 10, etc., hands that might have floated the flop with some backdoor flush draws. And the thing is, if he has an ace high type hand, I don't think he needs to start putting in bluffs, so my ace high I think is going to be good here, enough of the time to put in the call. So I do call, and before I even need to flip over my hand, my opponent mucks his cards, so I don't have to show, and we take down this pot uncontested on the river. Shortly after that hand, I chopped a bomb pot where I had a flush on one board, but it was paired against quads on the second board, so now my stack is up to $436, and we are trying to get unstuck in this 1-2 game. In this hand, under the gun 2 limps, and I'm next to act in the low jack, and I raise to $15 with ace 6 of hearts. The cutoff, who's a new player at the table, makes the call, the limper calls as well, so we're going to go 3 ways to a flop of jack 9-7 with 2 hearts. The original limper checks it over to me, and on this board texture we have an ace high flush draw. However, we don't have much else going for our hand, and this board is going to connect a lot with my opponent. So in real time I decided to check. However, I think just being aggressive in these spots, trying to put money in when we have a lot of equity, is a good play. So we head to a turn card, which is a very interesting card. It's a 5 of diamonds, so now we pick up a straight draw with our nut flush draw. Now my opponent on my right bets $20. Our hand is pretty good, we're drawing to the nuts, so I put in the call, and the beautiful thing is if we get raised, our hand can definitely withstand the raise. The river is the 10 of hearts, and now we have the nut flush. Now my opponent checks it over to me, and of course we're going to put money in this pot, and I'm going to go for a sizing of $80. Sadly, both of my opponents folded, and I immediately regretted not being more aggressive in this hand and getting more money in before the river. In this hand, I look down at ace-3 of diamonds under the gun, and I'm probably going to raise all of my suited aces in this game under the gun, so I raised $15. Under the gun 2 calls, the low jack and the high jack calls, so we're going to go 4 ways to a flop of ace, 4, jack, rainbow. I'm first to act out of position facing multiple opponents, and I have a made hand. I have a pair of aces, however it's one of my weaker ones. It's great to check these out of position, keep the pot manageable, and because you are out of position, you don't have to face a lot of tough spots moving forward. So I check, and luckily it checks around. The turn is a pretty bad card. It's another jack, so now any opponent that had a hand like jack 10, king jack, etc., they now have trips. It checks over again to the player that stacked me earlier in the session, and he bets $25. Nothing to do here other than make the call. We keep all worse hands in, so we're gonna go heads up to a river, which is the 3 of spades, bringing in a spade flush. I check it over to my opponent yet again. He checks back. He shows pocket 7s, so we get to flip over our ace 3 and take the pot down. So again, it's very important to not overplay your made hands, especially out of position. Be able to get to his cheap showdown, keep all worse hands in, and take down the pot.
Alright guys, so unfortunate spot there where we get all the money in on the turn with our 10 high flush, and our opponent has a set, get all the money in, and unfortunately he just rivers a boat, so we got stacked on that one. Ended up clawing back, just playing some good hands, making some good hands, finding aggression in the right spot. So we were in for a total of $600, out for $545 for a loss of about $55. So pretty happy to claw back there after that rough start. And anyway, I hope you guys learned something and enjoyed the vlog. If you did, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We are just getting started. It's only up from here, and I'll see you guys next time. I have an exciting announcement. I have finally started my very own Poker Bros Club on Poker Bros. And guess what, you guys? I am going to be hosting weekly free roll tournaments. That's right, completely free, zero catch. All you have to do is sign up. I'll put the club information right here. And I'm going to be streaming these tournaments live on my YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. So it's a fun time to get together, chat, have some fun, and of course, win some amazing prizes. It was a blast. I can't wait to do more of these. It's been a long time coming, so make sure you guys sign up and get involved. It's going to be a great time. And to not miss a single free roll tournament and get alerted, make sure you join my email list at pokerfaceash.com or follow me on Instagram at pokerface_ash.